The chamber stretched into darkness above, its ceiling lost somewhere in the void between stars. 12,000 alien representatives sat in rising tiers of crystalline seats, their bodies casting strange shadows under the pale blue light of dying suns captured in glass spheres. The air hummed with tension as massive doors, carved from the bones of ancient leviathans, ground open with a sound like thunder. Ambassador James Walker stepped through alone. He was small compared to the beings that surrounded him. Some towered 30 feet tall, their bodies wrapped in scales that shimmered like oil on water. Others floated in suspension fields, their forms too delicate for gravity. Still others existed as clouds of luminescent gas, their thoughts broadcast through translators that hung in the air like frozen lightning. All of them were watching him. Behind the transparent walls of the council chamber, the wreckage of a Dominion harvesting fleet tumbled through space. 17 warships, each one larger than a city, now drifted as broken metal and cooling plasma. The largest piece, the flagship of Fleet Commander Goroth himself, spun slowly past the observation windows. Its hull had been torn open from the inside, and fires still burned in the compartments where oxygen remained. The whispers began immediately. One ship, a Palian delegate hissed, its multiple mouths working independently. The humans did that with one ship. Impossible, another replied. The Dominion has never lost a harvesting fleet. Not in 800,000 years. High Arbiter Morith rose from his throne of black stone, his elongated body unfolding like a flower made of blades. He stood nearly 20 feet tall, and his 4 crimson eyes fixed on the human with an intensity that had broken lesser species. You stand before this council, accused of the destruction of a Dominion harvesting operation, he intoned. 17 vessels, 50,000 soldiers, Fleet Commander Goroth himself. The Arbiter paused, letting each word fall like a stone into still water. You have committed an act of war against the most powerful military force in the known galaxy. James did not look away. He did not tremble. He simply stood there, hands clasped behind his back, and met the Arbiter's gaze as if they were equals. The Dominion committed an act of war against humanity first, he said. His voice was calm, almost conversational. We simply responded in kind. A Dominion representative surged to his feet. He was massive, nearly 15 feet of gray muscle and armored plates, his tusked face twisted with rage. You are primitives, he snarled. Your species has no military designation, no interstellar authority, no right to resist lawful harvest. You exist to serve the Dominion's purpose, nothing more. James turned to face him directly. Something shifted in his expression, something cold and patient that made even the massive Dominion warrior hesitate. You came to our world uninvited. You took our people from their homes, their families, their lives. You hunted us like animals for sport and called it your right. James paused. So we learned to hunt you back. The silence that followed was absolute. High Arbiter Morith leaned forward, his blade-like appendages clicking together in what might have been curiosity. You claim to have destroyed a Dominion fleet in retaliation for their harvesting operations. But the Dominion has harvested over 900 species across this galaxy. None have ever fought back successfully. None have ever survived to speak of it. His voice sharpened. How did humanity accomplish what no other species could? James allowed himself a small smile. It was not a warm expression. Would the council like to see? 6 months earlier, Earth had been a world that knew nothing of the galaxy beyond its small corner of space. Humanity sent radio signals into the void, built telescopes to study distant stars, and dreamed of the day they might meet other intelligent life. They should have been more careful about what they wished for. The Dominion arrived without warning on a spring morning. Their harvesting ships descended through the atmosphere of 12 major cities simultaneously, massive vessels that blocked out the sun and cast entire populations into shadow. Within 4 hours, they had taken 320,000 humans. Men, women, children, the elderly, and the young. It made no difference to them. They selected their prey with the efficiency of creatures who had been doing this for longer than humanity had existed as a species. Military forces responded, but conventional weapons did nothing against Dominion shields. Missiles exploded harmlessly against energy barriers. Fighter jets were swatted from the sky like insects. The Dominion soldiers moved through streets with casual brutality, selecting humans for harvest with the dispassionate expertise of farmers choosing livestock. And then they left. The harvesting ships rose into the sky and vanished into the black between stars, leaving behind empty streets, grieving families, and a world that would never be the same. The Dominion expected humanity to react like every other species they had hunted. They expected fear, confusion, despair, and eventual acceptance. They expected humanity to understand its place in the galactic hierarchy and wait quietly for the next harvest. They were wrong. Within 72 hours of the abduction, every major conflict on Earth had been suspended. Nations that had been enemies for generations signed emergency treaties. Religious leaders who had preached division for decades called for unity. Political rivals who had built careers attacking each other stood together at press conferences and spoke with one voice. Earth was unified for the first time in human history, and it was unified by rage. Within 1 week, the United Earth Defense Initiative was formed. Every resource, every scientist, every soldier, every factory was redirected toward a single goal: finding the beings who had taken their people and making them pay. Within 1 month, humanity had its first breakthrough. A Dominion scout ship had crash-landed in the mountains of Tibet, its crew dead from the impact, but its technology intact. Teams of engineers and physicists descended on the wreckage like vultures, stripping it down to its component parts and studying each piece with desperate intensity. Dr. Elena Vance was the first to understand what they were looking at. She was a theoretical physicist who had spent her career studying concepts that her colleagues called impossible. And now she found herself staring at impossible made real. Their technology is ancient, she reported to the Emergency Council. This ship uses the same basic principles as vessels described in the oldest records we've recovered. They haven't innovated in hundreds of thousands of years. General Marcus Torres, commander of Earth's newly unified military forces, leaned forward. What does that mean for us? Alana's eyes were bright with something that might have been excitement or fear. It means they've become complacent. They've hunted for so long without real opposition that they've stopped improving. They've stopped adapting. She paused. But humans never stop adapting. It's what we do. Within 3 months, humanity had built its first faster-than-light vessel. They called it the Retribution, and it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Where Dominion ships were elegant and ancient, the Retribution was brutal and new. Where Dominion technology had remained unchanged for eons, the Retribution incorporated innovations that humanity had developed in mere weeks. Commander David Reed was chosen to lead the mission. He was a former Special Operations officer who had lost his wife in the initial harvest, and there was something in his eyes that made even hardened soldiers uneasy. "We're not going out there to explore," he told his crew as they prepared for launch. "We're not going to make friends or establish diplomatic relations. We're going to find our people, and we're going to bring them home. Whatever it takes." The Retribution launched on a summer evening, rising into the sky on pillars of fire that lit the darkness like a second sun. Millions watched from below, their faces illuminated by the glow of humanity's first step into a galaxy that had tried to prey upon them. Back in the council chamber, James Walker activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room. It showed the journey of the Retribution, its battles, its discoveries, and its final confrontation with Fleet Commander Gorith's harvesting fleet. "We found your operations," James said. "We found where you were keeping our people. And when your fleet tried to stop us from taking them back, we showed you what humans do to those who hunt us." High Arbiter Morth studied the display for a long moment. "You have made an enemy of the Dominion," he said finally. "They will not rest until your species is exterminated." James nodded slowly. "We're counting on it." The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. The Arbiter raised one blade-like appendage for silence. "Explain." "The Dominion has hunted for 800,000 years," James said. "They've never faced a species that hunts them back. They've never faced prey that becomes the predator." He looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives of 1,000 worlds. "We're going to give them something they've never experienced before. We're going to give them fear." The holographic display shifted, showing something new. Ship designs, weapon specifications, battle plans, and we're inviting the rest of the galaxy to join us. The council chamber fell into chaos after James Walker's announcement. Representatives screamed in 100 languages, some demanding the humans' immediate execution, others calling for emergency sessions, still others simply fleeing toward the exits as if the Dominion might appear at any moment to punish those who had witnessed such heresy. High Arbiter Morth watched it all with ancient eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall like waves upon a shore. When he finally raised his hand for silence, the gesture carried the weight of 800,000 years of authority. "You offer war against the Dominion," he said to James. "You offer extinction. I offer a choice," James replied. "The same choice every species in this chamber has faced at some point in their history. Submit or fight." He paused. Humanity chose to fight. A small delegation near the bottom of the chamber stood. They were the Velani, a species of delicate crystalline beings who had been marked for harvest 3 generations ago and had survived only by hiding in the deepest reaches of unexplored space. "How many ships does humanity possess?" their speaker asked, her voice like wind chimes in a storm. "Currently?" 12. James waited for the laughter to subside before continuing. "But we've learned something important about the Dominion, something that changes everything." He activated another section of the holographic display. It showed captured Dominion databases, their contents translated into symbols the Council could understand. The Dominion doesn't innovate. They haven't developed new technology in over 700,000 years. They use the same ships, the same weapons, the same tactics they've always used, because they've never needed to change. James smiled coldly. Humanity developed the atomic bomb in 6 years, went from first flight to landing on our moon in 66 years, and built our first faster-than-light ship in 3 months. We don't just adapt. We evolve. The display shifted again, showing something that made even the massive Dominion delegates pause. "This is the Prometheus," James said. "Our second-generation warship, built using principles the Dominion abandoned millennia ago as impractical. It's faster than anything they have, better armed, and completely invisible to their sensors." He looked around the chamber. "We didn't come here to ask for help. We came here to offer it." Meanwhile, in the depths of Dominion space, something was happening that the galaxy had never seen before. Commander David Reed stood in the control center of Harvesting Station Theta, surrounded by the bodies of Dominion soldiers who had learned too late the humans were not prey. His team of 40 had taken the station in under 2 hours, a facility that housed over 100,000 prisoners from dozens of species. Now those prisoners were free, and they were angry. "Commander," Lieutenant Maria Santos reported, her voice tight with controlled excitement, "we've accessed their database. The captured humans aren't here." Reed's jaw tightened. Where? A place called the Hollow Zone. It's referenced in multiple files, but the coordinates are encrypted with protocols we've never seen. She paused. There's something else. The Dominion isn't just holding prisoners there. They're conducting experiments. What kind of experiments? Before Santos could answer, an alarm blared through the station. Dominion reinforcements were arriving. A full battle group of 50 ships, dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Reed studied the tactical display for 3 seconds. Then he started giving orders. Santos, continue working on those coordinates. Everyone else, defensive positions. We're not leaving until we have what we came for. Private Thomas Gray, the youngest member of the team, looked at the approaching fleet with wide eyes. Sir, there's 50 ships. We have 1. Reed didn't look away from the display. Then we'd better make every shot count. On Earth, Dr. Elena Vance was having a breakthrough that would change the course of the war. She hadn't slept in 4 days. The walls of her laboratory were covered in equations that most physicists would consider impossible, and the holographic models floating above her desk showed configurations of space-time that had never been attempted. "You're going to kill yourself," General Torres said, entering with a cup of coffee that Elena grabbed without looking away from her work. "I'm close to something," she muttered. The Dominion drives work by folding space, creating a tunnel between 2 points. It's elegant, efficient, and completely predictable. Predictable is bad? Predictable means they can be tracked. Every time one of our ships uses captured Dominion technology, we're announcing our position to anyone with the right sensors. Elena finally turned to face him. "But I think I've found another way. A method the Dominion abandoned thousands of years ago because they couldn't make it work." Torres raised an eyebrow. "And you can?" "I think so. It's called phase shifting. Instead of folding space, you slide the ship into a parallel dimension, travel there, and slide back out at your destination." Her eyes gleamed. "It's faster, more efficient, and completely undetectable." "What's the catch?" Elena's expression sobered. "If the calculations are wrong by even a fraction of a percent, the ship will be torn apart at the quantum level. The pilot will cease to exist in any meaningful sense of the word." Torres was silent for a long moment. "How do we test it?" "I need a volunteer. Someone willing to risk complete annihilation for the chance to give humanity an advantage." She paused. "I've already had 6,000 applications." At Harvesting Station Theta, the battle had begun. The retribution was a single ship against 50. But Commander Reed had spent months studying Dominion tactics. He knew their patterns, their weaknesses, their blind spots. And he had something they couldn't understand, a crew that was willing to die rather than surrender. "Evasive pattern delta," he ordered as plasma fire streaked past the hull. "Santos, status on those coordinates?" "Still working on it, sir. Their encryption is unlike anything in our database." The ship shuddered as a shot clipped their shields. Warning lights flashed across the bridge. "Shields at 60%, the tactical officer reported. We can't take many more hits like that." Reed studied the enemy formation. 50 ships arranged in a standard Dominion hunting pattern. They were spreading out, trying to surround the retribution and cut off any escape. Standard tactics. Predictable tactics. "Helm, take us into the debris field," Reed ordered. Full speed. His crew exchanged glances, but obeyed without hesitation. The retribution dove toward the remains of a shattered moon, weaving between massive chunks of rock and ice that the Dominion ships were too large to follow. "Sir," the helmsman said nervously, "even we're barely small enough to navigate this." "I know." Reed watched the tactical display as the Dominion fleet was forced to slow down, to spread out even further to cover all possible exit points. "That's the point. He opened a channel to the station below. Santos, I'm sending coordinates. There's a gap in their formation. 3 ships covering a 90-degree arc instead of the usual 6. In exactly 4 minutes, I'm going to create a distraction. When I do, I need you to launch the station's emergency pods toward that gap. Sir, those pods don't have weapons. They'll be defenseless. They won't be alone. Reed's voice was cold and certain. We're going to show the Dominion what happens when prey decides to fight back. All of it? He turned to his crew. In 30 seconds, we're going to do something the Dominion has never seen. We're going to attack their command ship directly. A single vessel against their flagship. He paused. Some of us might not survive, but every second we buy gives those pods a better chance. Every Dominion ship focused on us is one less ship hunting the freed prisoners. No one spoke. No one needed to. Helm, take us out of the debris field. Attack Pattern Omega. Target the flagship. The Retribution emerged from the shadows like a predator, unleashing its fury. Its weapons blazed with everything it had. Concentrated fire aimed at a single point on the enemy. Flagship's shields. The Dominion command ship was 10 times the Retribution's size. Its shields could withstand bombardment from a dozen conventional vessels. But the Retribution wasn't a conventional. VESSEL. Dr. Vance's latest modifications had increased their weapon output by 400%. The shield-breaking pulse that the Dominion had, considered a theoretical. Curiosity was now a practical weapon, and Commander Reed knew exactly where to aim it, the flagships. Shields failed at the same moment as the emergency. Pods launched from the station. 40,000 freed prisoners, representing 18 different species, scattered into the void while the Dominion fleet scrambled to respond to an attack they had never anticipated. On the bridge of the crippled flagship, Dominion Fleet Master Korvac stared at his burning displays in disbelief. How? He demanded. They are primitives. They have 1 ship. His second-in-command had no answer. Below them, on the Retribution, Santos finally broke through the encryption. Commander, I have the coordinates for the hollow zone. Her voice was shaking. Sir, you need to see this. The humans they took. They're not just being held prisoner. Reed looked at the data she sent to his console. His blood went cold. They're being trained, he said quietly. The Dominion is turning our people into weapons. The tactical display showed Dominion ships beginning to recover, reforming their hunting patterns. In minutes, they would have the Retribution surrounded again. Reed made his decision. All hands, prepare for emergency phase shift. He looked at his crew. We're going to the hollow zone. We're bringing our people home. The Retribution's engines powered up with a sound no Dominion ship had made in 700,000 years. Space rippled around the vessel like water disturbed by a stone, and then it was gone, leaving behind only chaos and the beginning of something the Dominion had never expected. Wargot the Retribution emerged from phase shift into a graveyard. Commander David. Reed stood at the observation window, his breath caught in his throat as he tried to process what lay before him. The hollow zone was not empty space. It was a cemetery of civilizations, stretching in every direction as far as sensors could detect. Thousands of ships drifted in the eternal darkness. Some were larger than cities, their hulls covered in languages that had been dead for longer than humanity had existed. Others were so alien in design that human minds struggled to recognize them as vessels at all. Twisted metal sculptures that might have been art or might have been weapons. Crystalline structures that pulsed with dying light. Organic masses that could have been ships or creatures or something in between. All of them were silent. All of them were dead. What happened here? Lieutenant Santos whispered. The answer came from the tactical display, where a massive structure dominated the center of the graveyard. It was built from the corpses of the derelict ships, welded and fused together over millennia into something that defied description. It pulsed with energy signatures and life signs, millions of life signs. Harvesting Station Omega. "That's where they're holding our people," Reed said. "That's where we're going." The Retribution moved through the graveyard like a ghost, using the debris as cover while they approached the station. Their phase shift drive made them invisible to standard Dominion sensors, but Reed wasn't taking chances. The hollow zone existed for a reason, and whatever that reason was, it had trapped species far more advanced than humanity. As they drew closer, the station's true scale became apparent. It wasn't just a prison. It was a world unto itself, a twisted metal planet constructed from the remains of conquered civilizations. Docking bays large enough to swallow battleships lined its surface. Guard towers bristled with weapons that Reed's tactical officer couldn't even identify. "Commander," Santos said, her voice tight with controlled fear, "I'm picking up communications from inside the station." Human communications. Reed's heart hammered in his chest. "Put it through." Static filled the bridge, then resolved into a voice. Female, calm, controlled. "Unidentified vessel. This is Captain Helena Cross of the Earth Defense Initiative. If you are who I think you are, do not approach the station. Repeat, do not approach. They're watching." Reed grabbed the communications console. "Captain Cross, this is Commander Reed of the Retribution. We're here to extract you and the other prisoners. What is your status?" A pause. Then, with something that might have been dark humor, "Our status is complicated, Commander. The Dominion has been very interested in human capabilities. They've been testing us. Testing you how? They put us in arenas, made us fight their soldiers, their creatures, each other." Another pause. "We've been winning." Santos looked at Reed with wide eyes. The reports from the captured database had suggested the Dominion was experimenting on the human prisoners. But this was something else entirely. "They're afraid of you," Reed said slowly. Understanding dawning. "They should be." Helena's voice hardened. "Commander, listen carefully. The Dominion has been hunting species across this galaxy for 800,000 years. They've never encountered anything like us. They don't understand why we keep winning, why we won't break, why their psychological conditioning doesn't work. They've become obsessed with figuring out what makes humans different. And have they? No, but they've learned enough to be terrified." Helena paused. "There's something else you need to know. The other prisoners here, some of them have been held for thousands of years, some for longer. The Dominion doesn't just harvest species, Commander. They collect them, study them, break them, but not humans. No, not humans. And that's why we need to be very careful about what happens next." The Retribution found a blind spot in the station's sensor grid, a gap created by the debris of an ancient ship that had crashed into the station's hull centuries ago and never been cleared. Reed led a strike team through the wreckage, cutting their way into the station's lower levels. What they found inside was a nightmare made real. The station was divided into sectors, each one dedicated to a different captured species. Some sectors were designed as habitats, carefully constructed environments that mimicked the prisoners' home worlds. Others were laboratories, filled with equipment that Reed couldn't begin to understand. Still others were arenas, massive coliseums where the Dominion forced their captives to fight for entertainment. The human sector was different. It was a fortress. Dominion had tried to build a standard containment facility for the captured humans. That facility had been destroyed within the first week. They had built a second, more secure structure. It had lasted 2 weeks. The third attempt had included energy barriers, armed guards, and constant surveillance. The humans had escaped within 3 days. Now, The human sector was a maze of barricades and defensive positions, constructed from stolen materials and repurposed Dominion equipment. Guard patrols gave the area a wide berth. The few who entered did not return. Reed's team made contact with the human resistance near what had once been a processing center. Captain Helena Cross was waiting for them, flanked by soldiers who had transformed from frightened prisoners into something far more dangerous. "Commander Reed," she said, extending her hand. "Welcome to our little corner of hell." Reed took her hand, feeling calluses earned through months of fighting. "You've built quite an operation here, Captain." "We had good motivation." Helena's eyes were hard. "They took 320,000 of us from Earth. Only about 200,000 are still here. The others were sent to different facilities, sold to collectors, or killed in the arenas." She paused. "We've been keeping a list. Every name, every face, every death. We're going to get everyone home," Reed promised. "I know." Helena smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "But first, we're going to do something else. Something the Dominion never expected." She led him through the barricades to a hidden observation post overlooking one of the station's central chambers. Below, Reed could see Dominion officials meeting with representatives from a dozen other species. It appeared to be some kind of auction. "They're selling prisoners," Helena explained. "Species that have broken, that are useful as slaves or entertainment. The ones who won't break, they keep here. They study them, try to understand them, and us. We're the prize, Commander. The Dominion has been trying to sell humans for months, but no one will buy us. Word has spread about what happened at the harvesting stations, about the fleet you destroyed. Everyone is afraid of the species that fights back." She turned to face him directly. "But that's not why I brought you here. Look at the other prisoners. Really look at them." Reed looked. He saw beings of every shape and size, some humanoid, some utterly alien. Most had the broken look of creatures who had given up hope. But a few, a scattered handful, watched the auction with something different in their eyes. "They're watching us," Reed realized. "The other prisoners, they're watching to see what we do." For 800,000 years, every species that fought back was eventually crushed, Helena said. The survivors learned to submit, to accept their place in the hierarchy. But we haven't submitted. We haven't accepted. And they're starting to wonder if maybe they gave up too easily. She gestured toward the auction chamber. "There are 47 species imprisoned in this station. Most have been here for longer than human civilization has existed. They've forgotten what it means to resist." Her voice dropped. "But they're remembering now. They're watching us win, watching us fight, watching us refuse to break. And they're starting to ask themselves a question they haven't asked in millennia." "What question?" Helena's smile widened. "What if we all fought back together?" The plan was audacious, borderline suicidal, and completely human. Instead of escaping with just the captured humans, Reed and Helena would coordinate an uprising across the entire station. Every species, every sector, every prisoner who still had the will to fight. They would strike simultaneously, overwhelming the guards through sheer numbers and the element of surprise. "The Dominion has never faced a coordinated multi-species resistance," Helena explained. "Their entire system is built on keeping prisoners separated, making each species feel alone. If we break that isolation, if we show them they're not alone, we change everything," Reed finished. They spent 3 days preparing, smuggling messages to other sectors, identifying which species could still fight and which had been too broken to contribute, mapping guard patrols, weapon caches, escape routes. On the 4th day, they launched their attack. The uprising began at midnight station time, when the guard shifts were changing and the Dominion command was at its most vulnerable. Humans led the charge, but they were followed by beings who hadn't raised a weapon in anger for thous. Ands of years. The Valani, crystalline and delicate, discovered that their bodies could generate electromagnetic pulses that disrupted Dominion equipment. The Moradi, massive six-armed warriors who had been docile slaves for centuries, remembered that they had once been the greatest soldiers in their sector of space. The Tesseract, a species of collective consciousness that the Dominion had tried to fragment, reunited and brought their vast mental abilities to bear against their captors. For the first time in galactic history, the hunted became the hunters. In the chaos, Reed received a transmission from the Retribution. Santos's voice was urgent. "Commander, we have a problem. Dominion reinforcements are incoming. A lot of them." "How many?" 73 ships. They're calling it a cleansing fleet." Santos paused. "Commander, they're not coming to retake the station. They're coming to destroy it. All of it. Everyone inside." Reed looked at the battle raging around him, at humans and aliens fighting side by side against their oppressors. Millions of prisoners who had just discovered hope again. They couldn't let them die. How long until the fleet arrives? 6 hours. 6 hours to evacuate millions of prisoners from a station the size of a small planet. 6 hours to accomplish the impossible. Reed opened a channel to every frequency on the station. "This is Commander Reed. The Dominion is sending a fleet to destroy this station. We have 6 hours to get everyone out." He paused. "I know some of you have been imprisoned for longer than my species has existed. I know you've been told that resistance is futile, that the Dominion cannot be defeated. But look around you. Look at what we've accomplished tonight. The Dominion is afraid, and they should be." He took a breath. 6 hours. That's what we have. Let's make them count. The race against annihilation had begun. 5 hours and 43 minutes until the cleansing fleet arrived. "Commander." Reed stood in what had been the station's central command hub, now a chaotic coordination center where humans and aliens worked side by side for the first time in galactic history. Screens displayed evacuation routes, ship capacities, and the growing red marker representing the incoming Dominion Armada. "We have 600 operational escape vessels," Lieutenant Santos reported, her voice hoarse from hours of constant work. "Transport capacity for maybe 2 million prisoners." Reed looked at the population counter. 4.3 million life forms still on the station. "That's not enough." "I know." "Sir," Captain Helena Cross pushed through the crowd, her uniform stained with blood and burn marks from the ongoing battles in the outer sectors. "The Dominion loyalists are making a last stand in the northern quadrant. They're holding 200,000 prisoners as shields. Can we break through?" "Not in time. Not without killing the hostages." Helena's jaw tightened. "But we might have another option." She led Reed to a holographic display showing a section of the station he hadn't seen before. It was deeper than the prison sectors, hidden beneath layers of security that should have been impenetrable. "The Valani helped us crack the encryption," Helena explained. "This is what the Dominion was really protecting. Not us. Not any of the prisoners. This." The display revealed a chamber carved from the heart of the station, and inside it, something that made Reed's breath catch. Ships. Hundreds of them. Ships that didn't match any design in Dominion records. Ships that seemed to predate the station itself by millions of years. They were elegant, almost organic in their construction, and they pulsed with an energy that the sensors couldn't quite identify. "What are they?" "That's what I asked the Tesseract," Helena said. "They've been here longest, nearly 50,000 years. They remember stories from before their imprisonment, stories of a species that existed before the Dominion rose to power." Reed studied the alien vessels. The builders of those ships? The architects. That's what the Tesseract called them. They were the dominant civilization in this galaxy, when the Dominion was still learning to use fire. They created technology that makes everything we've seen look like children's toys. What happened to them? Helena's expression darkened. The Dominion happened. They were the architect's first and greatest harvest. But before they fell, they hid their most advanced technology here, in a region of space so dangerous that even the Dominion wouldn't follow them, the Hollow Zone. Yes, the graveyard we flew through isn't natural. It's a defense system designed to destroy any ships that approach without the proper codes. Helena paused. The Dominion built this station around the architect vault, trying to access the technology inside. They've been trying for 800,000 years. Reed processed this. And they've never succeeded? No. The vault recognizes Dominion biosignatures and refuses to open. It was designed that way, a final act of defiance from a species facing extinction. Helena smiled grimly. But here's the interesting part. The vault doesn't recognize humans. We're too new, too different from anything the architects knew. When I approached the door, it opened. 4 hours and 12 minutes until the fleet arrived. Reed led a team into the vault while Helena coordinated the ongoing evacuation. The architect ships were even more impressive up close, their hulls flowing like liquid metal, their interiors configured in ways that seemed to shift depending on the observer's expectations. This is incredible, Santis breathed, running her hand along a control console that lit up at her touch. The technology in one of these ships could advance human science by centuries. We don't have time for research. Reed studied the largest vessel, a command ship that seemed to respond to his presence. Can we fly them? I don't know. The controls are intuitive, almost like they're reading my thoughts. Reed stepped onto the bridge of the command ship. Displays activated around him, showing the station, the approaching fleet, the millions of prisoners still trying to evacuate. The ship seemed to understand what he needed before he knew himself. Santos, get teams on every ship in this vault. Find anyone who can make them respond, human or otherwise. Sir, we don't know what these ships can do. Neither does the Dominion. That's our advantage. The architect vessels launched from the vault one by one, rising through access shafts that had been sealed for millennia. The prisoners on the station watched in disbelief as ancient ships joined the evacuation fleet, their holds expanding in ways that defied physics to accommodate millions of refugees. But even with the architect technology, they were still racing against time. 3 hours until the cleansing fleet arrived. Reed was coordinating the final evacuation push when a transmission cut through all channels. The voice was Dominion, but it carried an authority that made even the hardened. Soldiers pause. This is Supreme Commander Vorath of the Dominion Cleansing Fleet. You have 1 hour to vote. Surrender the human leadership and return all stolen property to Dominion custody. Failure to comply will result in the complete annihilation of the station and everyone aboard. Reed opened a response channel. This is Commander David Reed of the Earth Defense Initiative. I have a counter-offer. Turn your fleet around and leave this sector. Any ship that remains when we depart will be destroyed. Laughter echoed through the speakers. You threaten us? You are one species, barely centuries old. The Dominion has ruled this galaxy for 800 millennia. You are nothing but prey who has forgotten its place. We're prey that destroyed your harvesting fleet. Prey that escaped your prison station. Prey that just unlocked technology you've been trying to access for longer than our species has existed. Reed's voice hardened. And now we're prey with a fleet of architect warships and absolutely nothing left to lose. Silence on the channel. Then, slowly, Supreme Commander Vorath spoke again. You are bluffing. The architect vault cannot be opened. We have tried for 800,000 years. Check your sensors. The Architect command ship rose into view of the approaching fleet, its hull gleaming with energy that made Dominion instruments scream warnings. Behind it, 47 other Architect vessels formed a defensive line between the station and the cleansing fleet. "The difference between you and us," Reed said quietly, "is that you've spent 800,000 years trying to take what isn't yours, trying to control what you couldn't create, trying to destroy what you couldn't understand." He activated the Architect ship's primary weapons, and space itself seemed to bend around the barrel. "We don't destroy. We adapt. We evolve. We figure out how things work, and we make them better." The cleansing fleet had stopped advancing. On their bridges, Dominion commanders stared at sensor readings that couldn't possibly be real. "You have one chance," Reed continued. "Turn around and leave. Tell your masters what you saw here. Tell them that humanity doesn't just survive. We don't just fight back. We win." Supreme Commander Vorth's voice was barely a whisper. "If we retreat, the High Council will execute us. If you don't retreat, I will. 2 hours and 17 minutes until the Chin." Original deadline. The cleansing fleet turned and ran out. The evacuation was completed with 43 minutes to spare. 4.3 million prisoners, representing 47 species, loaded onto the Architect vessels and the captured escape craft. They jumped to coordinates provided by the Architect navigation systems, emerging in a region of space so far from Dominion territory that even their fastest ships would take decades to reach. Reed stood on the bridge of the command ship, watching E-stars streamed past as they traveled faster than anything the galaxy had seen in millions of years. Behind him, Helena Cross approached. "The other species want to talk to you," she said. "All of them. They want to know what comes next." Reed turned from the view screen. "What do you think comes next?" Helena smiled, and for the first time since her capture, it reached her eyes. "The Dominion has ruled through fear for 800,000 years. They've convinced the galaxy that resistance is futile, that submission is the only option. But we just proved that's a lie." She gestured toward the millions of refugees now free for the first time in generations. "These people saw us fight, saw us win, saw us refuse to accept our place in the hierarchy." Her voice hardened. "They're going to tell others. Word is going to spread. And one day, the Dominion is going to wake up to find that the galaxy has remembered what it means to resist." Reed nodded slowly. "And humanity?" "Humanity is going to be there to lead them." Helena stepped closer. "Commander, the Galactic Council wants to meet with us. They've been watching everything that happened, and they're terrified. Not of the Dominion. Of us, because we succeeded where everyone else failed. Because we changed the rules. For 800,000 years, the galaxy has operated on a simple principle. The Dominion hunts, everyone else submits. We broke that principle. We showed that it doesn't have to be that way." Reed thought about the council chamber, the thousands of representatives from hundreds of worlds. He thought about Earth, about the families still waiting for news of their loved ones. He thought about the 320,000 humans who had been taken, and the 200,000 who are now free. "Schedule the meeting," he said finally. "It's time for humanity to introduce itself to the galaxy." Helena raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly are we going to tell them?" Reed looked at the stars streaming past, at the impossible ship carrying them toward an uncertain future. He thought about everything humanity had accomplished in the past 6 months, everything they had overcome, everything they had become. "We're going to tell them the truth," he said. "The Dominion hunted every species in this galaxy. They conquered worlds, exterminated civilizations, built an empire on the bones of those who couldn't fight back." He turned to face Helena directly. "And then they made the mistake of hunting us. Now we're going to hunt them back. And we're inviting anyone who wants revenge to join us." The architect's ship hummed with ancient power as it carried humanity toward its destiny. The war was just beginning. 1 year had passed since the liberation of Harvesting Station Omega. 1 year since humanity had unlocked the Architect Vault. 1 year since the galaxy had begun to change. Ambassador James Walker stood once again in the Galactic Council chamber, but this time he was not alone. Behind him stood representatives of 47 species, all former prisoners of the Dominion, all now members of the Coalition of Free Worlds. They filled the lower tiers of the chamber, their presence a living testament to what humanity had accomplished. High Arbiter Morth rose from his throne, and James could see something in those 4 crimson eyes that had never been there before. Fear. The Dominion has formally requested asylum, Morth announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. Their remaining forces have retreated to their homeworld systems. They claim that continued resistance is impossible and wish to negotiate terms of surrender. The chamber erupted. Species that had been hunted for millennia roared their triumph. Others called for blood, for vengeance, for the complete annihilation of their former oppressors. Still others sat in stunned silence, unable to process a reality where the Dominion was no longer the ultimate power. James waited for the chaos to subside before speaking. 1 year ago, I stood in this chamber and offered the galaxy a choice. Submit to the Dominion or fight alongside humanity. He looked around at the assembled representatives. Many of you chose to fight. Many more joined us as word spread of what was possible when prey became predator. He activated a holographic display showing the current state of galactic affairs. The Dominion's territory had shrunk by 70%. Coalition forces had liberated over 200 harvesting stations. Billions of prisoners were now free. But this victory is not about revenge, James continued. It is not about becoming what the Dominion was. We did not fight to replace one hunter with another. He turned to face a small delegation that had entered the chamber through a side door. They were Dominion, but young, barely adults by their species standards. They walked with their heads down, their massive bodies somehow diminished by shame. These are the children of Dominion commanders, James explained. They have come to speak for themselves, not for the regime that raised them. They have something to say to this council. The eldest of the young Dominion stepped forward. His name was Torek, and he had been raised on stories of his ancestors' glorious hunts. Now he looked at the species his people had terrorized for millennia and struggled to find words. We were taught that hunting was our purpose, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. That other species existed to feed our empire. That strength was the only virtue and mercy was weakness. He paused, gathering himself. We were wrong. We have always been wrong. 800,000 years of wrong. He looked at James directly. The humans showed us something we had forgotten. Something our ancestors knew before they became what they became. What is that? James asked. That creation is more satisfying than destruction. That protecting the weak is more rewarding than preying on them. That a legacy of building is worth more than a legacy of blood. The chamber was silent. The young ones among us have studied what happened at the Hollow Zone, Torek continued. We have learned that our ancestors were once like you. Explorers, builders, dreamers. We became hunters because we were afraid, because we found something in the darkness that terrified us, and instead of facing it, we ran. We have been running ever since. High Arbiter Morth leaned forward. What did your ancestors find? Torek's massive shoulders sagged. We do not know. The records were destroyed long ago. But whatever it was, it broke something in us. Made us believe that the only way to survive was to become the most dangerous thing in the galaxy, to consume everything before it could consume us. He looked at James again. The humans did not run. When we came to harvest them, They did not hide or submit or accept their fate. They fought. They adapted. They evolved. His voice trembled. And when they won, they did not become what we were. They offered their enemies a chance to change. He dropped to one knee, a gesture of submission that the Dominion had never made to any species. We are asking for that chance. Not for our leaders, who chose their path long ago. For our children. For the future. For the possibility that we might someday become what we should have been. James was silent for a long moment. Behind him, the coalition representatives waited, many of them survivors of Dominion hunts, who had every reason to demand vengeance. When James finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried to every corner of the chamber. 1 year ago, my people were prey. We had no ships, no weapons, no allies. The Dominion could have exterminated us without effort. He paused. Instead, they tried to break us. They captured our people and put them in arenas, tried to turn them into weapons, studied them to understand what made them different. He looked at the coalition representatives behind him. They learned nothing, because the thing that makes humanity different is not in our bodies, or our technology, or our tactics. It is in our refusal to accept what others tell us we must be. He turned back to the young Dominion. You want a chance to change? You will have it. Not because you deserve it, but because we refuse to become you. We refuse to let 800,000 years of hunting define what happens next. James stepped forward and extended his hand to Torek. The coalition of free worlds is not an empire. We do not conquer. We do not harvest. We build. We protect. We help those who were once powerless become strong enough to protect themselves. Torek stared at the offered hand as if it were an alien artifact. If your people truly want to change, you will be welcome to join. U.S., not as rulers, not as hunters, as members, equal to every other species, responsible for your actions, committed to the future we are building together. Slowly, Torek reached out and took James's hand. The chamber exploded with noise. Some cheering, others protesting, still others simply unable to process what they had witnessed. The galaxy's oldest hunters, accepting peace from prey they had tormented for less than a year. High Arbiter, Morath watched it all with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. When he finally spoke, his voice cut through the chaos. The Council recognizes the Coalition of Free Worlds as a legitimate governing body. The Dominion's request for asylum is granted under Coalition supervision. All active hunting operations are permanently suspended. He paused, looking at James with something that might have been respect. In 800,000 years, no species has accomplished what humanity has achieved in 12 months. You have not just defeated the Dominion. You have changed the nature of galactic civilization. James nodded. We have only begun, High Arbiter. There is a lot of building left to do. The ceremony concluded with the formal establishment of the Coalition capital, a world donated by the Tesseract in gratitude for their liberation. Representatives began the work of transforming. A galaxy built on hunting into. Something new. But James did not stay for the celebrations. He found Captain Helena Cross on the observation deck of the Architect command ship, now christened the Unity, watching the stars that humanity had once dreamed of reaching. You look troubled, Helena said. Not troubled, thoughtful. James joined her at the viewport. Torek said something that has been bothering me, about what his ancestors found in the darkness, the thing that made them become hunters. You think it is still out there? I think we should find out. James pulled up a star chart, highlighting regions of space that remained unexplored. The architects built technology that even the Dominion could not understand. They hid it in the most dangerous region of the galaxy, protected by defenses that held for millions of years. Why? Helena considered this. You think they were hiding from the same thing? I think the architects knew something the Dominion forgot. Something important enough to build an empire around protecting. He looked at her directly. I think humanity needs to find it before someone else does. Helena smiled. Another impossible mission? We seem to be good at those. She looked at the stars, at the millions of lives that had been saved, at the future that was now possible because humanity had refused to be prey. All right, she said finally. Let us go find out what scared the hunters. The Unity's engines powered up with a hum of ancient technology, now awakened by human hands. The ship that had carried the architects' hopes across the millennia prepared to carry humanity's hopes even further. Behind them, a galaxy began to heal. Species that had known only fear learned what it meant to live without predators. Children who had never seen the sky looked up at stars that were finally safe. The Dominion's hunters, those who chose to change, began the long process of becoming something new. And in the depths of space, moving toward mysteries that had frightened entire civilizations into becoming monsters. A single ship carried the species that had changed. Everything, they had been prey. They had become hunters. Now, they were becoming something else. Entirely. Explorers, builders, protectors. Human. The stars stretched before them like a canvas waiting to be painted. And humanity faced the unknown the way they had faced everything else. Together and unafraid. On Earth, in the memorial garden built to honor those who had been taken in the first harvest, a new inscription was added to the central monument. It read simply, "They hunted every species in the galaxy. Then they hunted us. Now we light the way for those who follow." And across 1,000 worlds, species who had forgotten what hope felt like looked up at the stars and smiled. The hunting was over. The building had just begun. The end